Hello everyone. I hope you guys had a positive week or productive or steady week, whatever it may be. I hope it was good. And I would like to welcome you guys again to Bouquet and just talk about this week's topic. I have the sage again, trying to get ready. And yeah, so I just wanted to say that again, last week I spoke about violence and terror in America for specifically the past 2 years. And with that comes with, violence inflicted upon other people. But this week I'll be talking about when it's violence inflicted upon yourself. And I'll be talking about my story. I'll be talking about, other cases where someone may harm themselves, or whether it be physically or not physically. I'll be talking about both because I suffer from both. So yeah, that's the topic for this week, self-harm. So with that, I want to, offer my story, what I personally suffer from in terms of physical harm. Well, I used to, not anymore. I used to cut myself. And I just want to make, my story aware to you guys. And I want to also shed some light on other conditions that can result in self-harm, such as people who burn themselves, people who cut like me, people who pick at wounds, who may have either one or both anorexia and or bulimia, or who have, excuse me if I'm not pronouncing this right, but trichotillomania, which is also known as the hair pulling disease, or disorder, excuse me. And I just want to make my story aware and other people's stories aware. I'm only here to talk about myself. I'm not gonna put other people's stories out there if that's not what they desire, but I am doing this in the hopes of just reaching someone and telling my story of healing and where I've been and how bad it was, in the hopes that it will help somebody, because that for me, with all of what I do with Bouquet, is what I want to do. I want to help people, and I want to inspire people to make positive changes in their life if that's what they want for themselves. So yeah, my story. So my story. To start off, I should say that I was in 2009, when I was around 16 years old. I was diagnosed with PTSD and depression. And I was diagnosed by the second therapist that I had, who is now my current therapist, Desiree. And yeah, like my story kind of goes a little far back. I've had depression for a long time, for as long as I can remember, honestly. I just didn't really have a name for it. But it wasn't until around, I want to say 6th grade, that I started, kind of outwardly expressing suicidal thoughts. In fact, one story that I do remember is that in the 8th grade, it was our class were gonna go to Costa Rica for a Spanish class trip, and we were the first class to go. And right before that trip, the school psychologist almost didn't allow me to go because I was expressing, suicidal thoughts or actions that I may or may not be planning on doing. And by the skin of my teeth, she let me go on that trip. And that trip was really strange, because it was my first time out of the country. My first or second time, I can't remember, but yeah, it was bad enough. And like in middle school, when these kind of thoughts started becoming known, I don't remember my parents really doing anything about it. Like, I don't specifically remember them having any kind of talk with me. If they did, then great, but I don't remember that. And it was, I would imagine, to both of my parents, who were, raised in a, traditional home, that this was kind of new to them. Like, I feel like maybe it was just never talked about with me, or maybe I've just never had this experience. But I feel like, the thought of suicide in the black community is very taboo, almost. And I guess my parents just didn't know what to do, and they just kind of hoped that, because I was also raised in a Christian home, so maybe they just thought I would turn to God and everything would be okay. But at that point, I knew that I wasn't gonna consider myself a Christian. So yeah. I don't remember when was the first time I started cutting. It just kind of happened. So now, I know that there is going to be speculation about, what leads to a person to do such things to themselves. And again, I'm only here to speak about myself. I'm not going to tell anyone else's story or put words in other people's mouths. But from my experience, what really led for me to let this anger out on myself, and because I also suffer from anxiety. I used to have really bad panic attacks, and just anxiety attacks and whatnot, and it's gotten better over the years, but basically, like, what led me to take all of that out on myself was I was going through a lot at home. For example, I kind of grew up thinking that I was a mistake, just because I wasn't, the pregnancy of me was not planned. And, seeing my parents argue all the time, like, who's gonna wait for me for the school bus to come, like, just seeing them argue all the time about that and all these other little fixings that had to do with me, that really, like, ingrained in me that, like, if I wasn't here, then they probably wouldn't have gotten married, and they probably wouldn't be in a 15-year disastrous marriage. Like, so I was blaming myself for that, and I was also blaming myself for being black. Not directly, like, I didn't know what it was at the time, but I have been blessed enough, or fortunate enough, to go to private school. And with that comes with the fact that I am a minority and I'm going to a predominantly white school. And that was really jarring to me, just because, like, I was, I always, like, even without, realizing my skin tone, like, I always just felt really different. Like, I always felt like I didn't belong, and that's something that still exists for me today. Being, whether it be racially or personality-wise, like, I just feel like I've never really belonged. So, and, being mixed, being a mixed child doesn't really help either. And I was also really angry about having to grow up really fast, in a few different ways. But I was mainly angry about just not being able to express myself in my childhood home. Like, the list goes on forever in terms of what phrases I could say that, you know, some black people might, you know, relate to, in terms of like, you know, your parent hits you and you start crying, and then you're like, oh, I'll give you something to cry about. Excuse me, I could say, you know, like, don't treat me like one of your friends. And it's just like, the list just goes on forever in terms of like things that black parents have said to their children that I think contributes to this really fucked up cycle of what we feed, what the black community assumes is traditional to feed their children. Like, in my experience, like, my parents really controlled us with fear. Specifically for me, like, the fear of getting hit, like that, I'm not even gonna talk about that right now. But and there were just other things going on in my life, like school, and finding out in the 2nd grade that I have learning disabilities. I have dyslexia and an auditory processing issue. So with that, like, my home life and my school life was just not what I thought it would be. And mainly it was just like putting up a front everywhere I went. Like, if I go to school, I'm acting out because I can't act out at home. If I'm at home and something bad happened at school, I can't tell my parents, because like, they're either not going to care, they're going to be like, get over it, or they're just not going to listen. So to me, it was like, what's the point of like bringing my, you know, what I have to say into the picture, because they're just not going to listen. And I think like a lot of parents, no matter what their race, do that. But from my experience, having a Caribbean mother and an African American father, it was just very, very strict, to say the least. So all in all, what I'm trying to say is that for myself, there was a lot to be angry about. And that's how it started manifesting itself into the physical. I mean, I just have a lot of thoughts and opinions about the little things that happen in our culture that get said to us, and they turn into these larger things. And like to give a personal example, I remember when I was a kid, and if I was upset or if I wasn't upset, my excuse was always, I'm tired. That was always my go-to in terms of like, why you look like you got an attitude, what the fuck you upset about, why you got that stank look on your face. My answer was always, I'm tired. And that was because, like, I remember one time coming home and I was upset by something, and I came in the house and my mom was like, I like had barely gotten through the door and I was taking my shoes off by the door, and my mom was like, she was just basically upset that like I had a look on my face, and she was like, every time you come in this house you better have a smile on your face. And like, it's just little things like that that really instilled in me that there was no such thing as self-expression growing up. Not in the least. I mean, like, yeah, once I turned like 14, they allowed me to like, you know, not allowed me, but I started making calendars for myself, because I didn't have any posters to put up on my wall or anything like that. And I just think, you know, the things that get said to women and the things that get said to our young men are just really are the starting point. Perhaps not for every case, but for some cases it's the starting point to really low self-esteem, really low self-worth, and just an disconnected view of yourself. And that's really harmful. And this is a really big thing about mental illnesses and mental health that I am passionate about and feel very strongly about, is because whether we realize it or not, the context and the way and how and what we say to people, whether it be small or big, can have a huge impact on that person. Like when my mom said, you know, every time you come in this house, you better have a smile on your face. That showed me that I can't be what I want to be. I have to be what you want me to see. You want to see me as. And that was really detrimental. I mean, on the flip side of that, like a positive thing that my mom said to me, and it's interesting because not a lot of people know this, but my favorite color is dark red, specifically dark red. And the reason for that is because I wore a red shirt one time and my mom was like, oh, that makes your eyes pop. And ever since then, my favorite color has been red. So the things that you say, and in relation to our young black men, you guys suffer too, because you guys hear, be a man, grow some balls, or, you know, stop acting so pussy, or, you know, it's really, it can be really detrimental to a person's identity and self-worth and self-esteem. And I think we overlook these things, especially in the black community, especially because living in New York, I mean, you see a lot of wonky parenting in the middle of the street or on the subway a lot, and it breaks my heart no matter what the race is, but I tend to see more of our black women just seeing things differently, and it really hurts me because, you know, to hear a mother say to her child, oh, why do you want this piece of candy, you so stupid, you know, just, I can't stand that. I really can't. And a lot of the time I struggle with where is the line in which I can step in and say, hey, you're wrong for doing that. And I've struggled with that a lot. But whether it's our young minority women or minority men, we have to make the choice to not carry down what we know. Yes, you may have come from a very difficult past, and yes, anger and strictness is maybe all you know, but you have to be receptive and open to other possibilities and step outside of yourself and realize that there are other ways to get the same point across. Like for me, I will never hit my children. Like there are very few excuses. Like if you're about to harm yourself and you, like, I see you reaching for something, I'm gonna gently grab you and be like, no, it's not what we do. But other than that, no. And it's just, I can go on about this for a long time, but like, just the biggest thing for me is we have to the way you word things can be detrimental to your child, and I'm an example of that. So yeah.